Okay, you heard Anita read from John chapter 5. My opinion, Jesus in chapter 5 of John is beginning to take over his people from the so-called spiritual leaders of the Hebrew nation. And I have a few introductory remarks. Isaiah said this in 700 and something BC. 700 BC. And it's paraphrased. Oh, that you would tear open the heavens and come down to make your name known. And of course, he didn't probably actually know what that meant. But we today, looking back at that scripture, know exactly what he meant. And in 700, he was aching to have that happen. But it's always in God's timing. Augustine, probably the best theologian after Paul in the Christian church, headquarters in Rome, about 350 AD, said this. Augustine said that the beginning of this gospel, the Gospel of John, the beginning of this gospel ought to be copied in letters of gold and placed in the most conspicuous place in every church. Wow. John's gospel. Rome has taken over and scattered the Jewish Hebrew. There is no more Jerusalem. John escaped to what we would call Asia Minor today, Turkey. And he had 7 or 8 or 9 churches to care for. And he's an older man. Commentators said he wrote this book in 80 AD. Rome was captured in 70 AD. Paul is dead. Peter's dead. We don't know where the rest of the disciples are. Pakistan, Afghanistan, they're all over the place. Africa. But this man right here decided that because of what's shaping up in Christianity, in the churches that he just cries for, and he can't journey, he's old. Some even commentators say he wrote this in 90, so he would be about that year. So what's so different about this gospel? The synoptics they call, a synoptic means in Hebrew, it's a gospel that tells a story, Matthew, and tells one in Mark, and tells in Luke, and they pretty well follow each other. It's about Jesus' work on the earth, by the healings and all that. They're pretty well, you can almost read those 3 gospels. Well, I read that in Matthew. Stephen read from Matthew, which something that Paul wrote. Those are synoptics. But rising up out of the Roman facade and in Christianity were teachers that saying Jesus was not God. He was a man. He was just like us. He was like a prophet. He was this and he was that. And this, the spirit of John the Apostle just rose up. And this is called the gospel of divinity. I am going to explain to you, he said in this document, who he really is. And I got a note here, while the other gospel writers treat principally the mysteries of the humanity of Christ, John makes known the divinity of Christ in the gospel. He did this because after other evangelists had written their gospels, heresies arisen about the divinity of Christ. I don't believe he was God. Today, that's still prevalent. Yeah. You look at one of the major religions in the world, he's a prophet. But here is the prophet, Muhammad. He was a good man. So, Augustine said that gospel says, in the beginning. Now, we're going back. In the beginning. And he says in 1 John, that which was from the beginning. So I'm starting all over. And I'm going to verify the truth that Jesus Christ was and is and will forever be God. Called by his position only, the only begotten Son of God. And Trinitarian ethics were taught by that man. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. It's not 1 plus 1 plus 1 equals 3 gods. And that's what this gospel is about. Another note I took down, by nature, this was called the man born blind. We're all born blind. If you look back what Adam did, Adam, humanity did in the garden, and that disobedience, it ruined our DNA, spiritual. And we became blind to what was happening, what God was saying. And in his timing, he had to send the only begotten Son to go through the agony of what he went through in order to redeem us and return us to that spiritual condition we had before the sin. Many commentators say that this chapter 9 is the most well-crafted of all stories in the Bible. Now, she read a pretty crafty one on 5. He said, I'm the light of the world. Chapter 8, just before this one, that lady caught in adultery. I don't know why she was alone. Where's the adulterous other one? He said, go and sin no more. I am the light of the world to one who was born blind. Me, you. I am the light. So they call it the classic dramatic form, occurs through 6 separated themes in this gospel. And that's the way I am going to, I don't like to call me a preacher. In the Bible, that gift handed to the church is pastor, teacher. Dan is both. I'm a teacher. So, in one question and in one scene, each scene leads perfectly into the next scene and the next question. I call it I don't know what I call it. I just forgot it. What's that? That's a stairway that goes up by itself. Escalator, yeah. I call it escalating Christology. What's that mean? Well, I had to look it up too. It means that step by step through every one of these segments we're going to get to, this man born blind gets to recognize what happened, how it happened, who gets the credit, and ends up what? An evangelist, a Christian. To the mire of an anger of the spiritual leaders of the time. He really teed them off. The fur started to fly, we're going to learn. But first I got to take you back to span 4,000 years of the cultural gap. There's all kind of gaps in the Bible, and we tend to read English in 2016. I can't understand that. Well, bridge the gap. Find out who knows Hebrew or Aramaic and go back to where the story is about. We just finished in Sunday school the book of Job. When did that occur? Well, it was written about 300, about something that happened before Abraham. There was a situation that those people back then handed down by word of mouth from grandma to the kids and down to down, even before Abraham was born, that if you sin, you're going to get punished. There is no other way. The only reason whatever's going on in my life today and in your lives, and we got all a different, really hard thing to handle, is because you sinned. And they're stiff to that. And that is not necessarily so. Because Jesus came to say, not all situations are punitive. Thank God. Thank God. I'm not being punished. Jesus took that away, and he remembers our sins no more. But they couldn't grasp that. And the spiritual leaders of that time, when we get into this gospel, held that against the people. And so they were frightened to do anything, and they quit going to temple. Nobody was going to temple. Jesus himself got thrown out of the synagogues. So I ain't going there anymore. Well, he doesn't use the word ain't. He did not attend there. He did everything by foot in the villages. Come to me. What is it? Healing and so forth. This particular graphic or theology was called theodicy. It's an attempt by wise men, like in the book of Job. All the cultures had wise men, but the Hebrew culture's wise men were admired by Egypt and Assyria and Babylon and everything. Oh, read those Hebrew wise men, what they wrote. You know, and the wise men sat around and took notes. They observed. They contemplated. They had wisdom. And so, they say, well, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's an attempt to defend God and his attributes and his holiness and protect it from what's going on today in the world. I have nephews that say, if God is so good, David, why is what's going on in America? It's because long time ago, your ancestor was not so good. So he sent his son to redeem humanity. So there is no explanation for that. The disciple learners wanted answers to that ancient argument. I want to answer. So that's where we're going to begin the gospel. You can open up to John 1:9:1. A little bit about these spiritual, so-called, I called them we knowers. They like to use that, the Pharisees. You're a sinner, but we know. We're students of Moses. We know. So, there's 613 commands I learned in the Bible, besides the 10 Commandments. And hundreds of interpretations of those other commands. And we're going to learn about it in chapter 9. I put down here, Jesus is slowly retrieving his people from the reasoners. Chapter 5. He's in the background. He's doing miracles. He's healing blind people, but their blindness was because of some accident or some disease or something. There has never, ever, until this chapter 9, been a man healed, born blind. Never. It's nowhere in the Bible, Old or New Testament, until chapter 9. So the key word in this gospel is light. L-I-G-H-T. And you know what he says about that. So I'm in chapter 1, and I'm going to take it in 6 sections. Pretend that you're observing a play on stage. And in the play, in each set, there's one person against some kind of people. There's just 2 protagonists. You said this and I said this and we won't meet. This is going to happen every section. There's 6 sections. There's really 7, but I ain't going to deal with the reasoners the last 3 verses. I'm just going as far as 38. So section 1 is 1 to 7. John 9, 1 to 7. And I'm going to read this. As he passed by what? Well, chapter 8 said he was around the temple. Chapter 5 said he was around the temple because there was a pool up north, Bethesda, and he's going to need a pool. So he passed by and he saw a man blind from birth. How do you know he's blind from birth? The Father told him. Stop. You got a bunch of disciples. Now, I'm not talking just about 12 apostles. Disciples, it says. Back in that culture, in the Greek culture, they learned it. A teacher didn't sit down in a building and teach. He walked and talked and pointed out Socrates and Aristotle and people like that. Jesus walked and said, watch. You guys, Peter, you're dumb. Watch. So he knew the man was blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned? Here we go, back to the 1900 BCs. That's 4,000 years ago. Who sinned? This man or his parents? This man in the womb? And they would quote scripture like the 2 boys fighting, who comes out first? Of Rachel? I think it's Rachel. You know, one hanging onto the nail. The other one gives up his firstborn and gives it to Jacob, the deceiver, and so forth. They use that scripture. Jesus changes the temple. Who sinned? This man or his parents? Jesus. I'm interrupting now. Jesus said, neither. I got a third option for you. He changed them and us from cause. What caused this? To purpose. I'm dealing in purpose. Well, I don't know the purpose. It's not for you to know. Or you would know. To this day, I do not know the purpose of some of the things that happen in my life. I guess a lot of you know that same thing. What is the purpose? I'm going through this. Why? You have to take it to the Lord. There's 42 chapters in Job. The scene was set in chapter 1, verse 1 to 6. Have you seen my servant Job? He's righteous. He lives right. He does everything right. He didn't even know that was going on. And you go down to chapter 42, he still doesn't know. And God gave him answers. To this day, Job doesn't know why he was full of boils. And his wife said, curse God and die. You're a wreck. So the works of God might be displayed in him, this man. Look at the next word. Disciples. That's me and you. We. Not I. Jesus did not say I. We. We must work the works of him who sent me while it's day and night. Night is coming when no one can work. The darkness is coming. I am the light of the world. While I am here, you learn, David, how to deal with situations and help these people through it. Neighbors, family members, prayer. As long as I'm in this world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground, and he made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam. Siloam's way on down beneath the city of David, about a half a mile away. Why didn't he say go up to Bethesda? It's just around the block. We're going to find out. Pool of Siloam, which means sent. As the Father has sent me, he said many times, I send you. And he's saying that to all of us sitting here today. I still am the light of the world, but I'm sending you. So he went, and he washed, and he came back seeing. End of Act 1. He went, did what he was told, didn't even ask. Jesus, will you please go to Siloam? No. Go to Siloam, wash up. And he came back, seeing. Blind from birth, seeing. Now what happened? When this story gets told, you're not supposed to spit on the Sabbath. I don't care what's in your mouth. Don't spit. It's one of those interpretations of these 613 commandments. Don't spit. What's that to do with worship God? Well, talk to these guys. That's why I'm going to shout. We know. In the culture, I looked it up. It may be because it's a device that some doctors use around the eye. They like anoint the eye with spit. But then he violated another Sabbatarian law. The Pharisees are called Sabbatarians. They don't think he is the Lord of the Sabbath. We are. We know how to interpret these laws. And so he dug and made mud with the spit. He had to get it so he could what? Violate another command. Paint your eyes. Well, the women understand that. You wouldn't do it with mud, but you paint. And so he wiped it on this guy, like this. Now, go to Siloam. Another violation. You're not supposed to travel over 1,000 yards on the Sabbath. That's about 1,500 yards away. Another violation. We've got 4 violations to the law, according to them. But he did exactly what he was told. He went in that water, and I came back seeing. Who do you think I'm going to follow? That guy says. as his faith escalates. And Jesus removes himself after Act 1 here, and just kind of stays in the background to see what this man, what he does, what happened, how he handles this. So now we get to Act 2. There's a little rest now. The man's neighbors raised a question. Apparently he had to walk back from Siloam, which means sent, to the neighborhood. He has to pass through the neighborhood. You know, and the Sabbatarians, or Pharisees, or we knowers, they're all up by the temple. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" We don't know how old this guy is. In that culture, you were a man at age 13. You're on probation, but you're a man. There is no such a thing as teenager. So, this is going to become important in later, another chapter. Some said, "It is he." Others in the neighborhood said, "No, but he looks like him." He kept saying, "I am the man." That sounds like what something Jesus would say. I am he. That's what God said in the desert to Moses. Just tell him, "I am sent you." So that these neighbors said to him, "How," and this is going to be used 4 times in this little gospel, "how were your eyes opened?" Like if you told me, then I'm going to believe that you really weren't blind or something. He answered, "The man." The man. Watch for the escalation now of Christology, an understanding of who that man Jesus is toward the end of this play. "The man called Jesus made mud. He anointed my eyes and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.'" He repeats all those violations of the Sabbath. So I went. I washed, and I received my sight. They said to him, "Where is he?" He said, "I do not know." Now I'm adding something. God forgive me. I don't know because I never saw him. He was blind. Go, take it easy, David. Don't get excited here. I love this story. I love this guy. I don't care how old he is. And I don't want to be relegated or anything. I think he was a Marine. I can't be sure, but he's an in-your-face guy, I'll tell you. We'll find out anyway. So, I don't know why the neighbors said, "Come on, we're taking you to the knowers." We don't know. How can this? Let's go see the Pharisees, the knowers. They know everything. They're the spiritual leaders. So now we're in 13 to 17. "So they brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind." Well, at least they're admitting that. He was blind. Now, it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees asked him, "How?" They know, but they don't want to admit it. No one could do this. They know biblical history unless it was God. It's never happened. They know the scriptures. "How were your eyes open?" He answered. Here's escalation now. "The man called Jesus." That's what what Anita read. That guy picked up the bed and he violated. "You're not supposed to carry that." "Who told you?" "I don't know. He's a man told me to get that bed out of here." And I'm walking after 38 years. But he went and found out, and what did he do? He came back to the knowers and told them who that man was. Jesus. Isn't that what you read, Anita? And now we got animosity and killing words coming out of the reasoners. We got to kill this man because we're going to lose what Rome has set up in this money coming in. Sounds like the United States in 2016. Our whole reason for having this, and they got all these people under our hands, is going to be ruined if this man wins. We got to kill him. And anybody that believes out loud that he's the Messiah, you're excommunicated. Now, I know, being born and raised a Catholic, I know what that means. But in that culture at that time, it meant you were thrown out of Hebrewism. Nobody in your village will ever go watch your kids. They won't get meals. If you're sick, they don't care. They won't visit you. You're excommunicated. It's like you've got a mark on your head. You're an outcast. You might as well move. That's excommunication. It's scary. So the man called Jesus, made mud, anointed my eyes, and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went, and I washed, and I received my sight. They said to him, where is he? I was blind. I don't know. I don't even know what he looks like. If I hear his voice, I don't know. They're trying to pin this dude down. You wait to see what happens. Okay, now we go into the next set. Set number 3, 13 to 17. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees asked him again how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud in my eyes. You notice he didn't say the man Jesus, because he already knows that's dangerous. That man saved my eyesight. He changed it. I have to protect him. I'm going to say, that man, he put mud in my eyes and washed. And he said, he put mud on my eyes, I washed, I see. So some of the Pharisees, listen to this. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. He's not under our thumb. And there was a division among them. So we don't know whether to believe this young man or believe our leaders. That happened before in Jesus' life. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him? Since you've never seen him, I'm saying. Since he has opened your eyes. He said, and he knows what that means in Hebrew. He's a prophet. So he came from I don't know. He came from man. He came now from man. Boy, he's climbing this escalator. He's now saying he's a prophet. Okay, let's go to the next section. This is from 18 to 23. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind. Oh my God, they're reasoners. And had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight. Now here's Dad and Mom coming in now. Do you imagine that mother? Let's say my boy is 25. He's been begging for 15 years, 10 years at the same place. Sometimes he makes some money, sometimes he doesn't. He's got to help with the cost, but he can't work. That mother, that's my son. He sees, he can work, he can help me. So the Pharisees, where am I at now? Oh, the Jews did not believe that he was blind and received his sight. So they called the parents, the man who had received his sight, and he asked them, the parents, is this your son? Duh. Well, who you say was born blind, how then does he now see? Now I'm asking you how. His parents answered, we know that this is our son. Well, thank you. Okay. And that he was born blind. We don't believe it, but thank you. But, now I got to find the other page. How he not sees, we do not know. Nor do we know who opened his eyes. Here's a good one. Ask him. He is of age. What if he was 13? He's a tough kid. What if he was 40? He's experienced. Even though he's blind. He was blind. He is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said this, and this is terrible. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews. I'm afraid of my pastor. They feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confesses Jesus to be Christ, that's Messiah, he was put out of the synagogue. That means put out of Hebrew culture. Jesus already left the synagogue. There's nothing going on there. Therefore, his parents said, he is of age. Ask him. So what do you think the reasoners are going to do? Call him back. And the fur starts to fly. I love it. Okay. Jesus leads the man to believe in the Pharisees interrogate the man a second time. Verse 24 to 34. So for the second time they called the man who has been blind and said to him, give glory to God. What does that mean? That means answer me like we want. If you say God, okay, we're okay with you. That's our answer. That's all they want. That man didn't know he was giving glory to God yet. But we know that this man is a sinner. Now listen to this young man. He answered, whether he is a sinner, I do not know. Now if he already reads he's a prophet, then he's probably not a sinner. A leader like you guys are. I don't know about that, but I do know that though I was blind, now I see. But he said to him, what did he do to you? How? They want to stay away from the truth that in the whole Bible, this has not been done. How did he do it? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, here we go. Way to go, baby. I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear again? Do you want to become his disciple? Yes. All right. Now they're burning up and getting darker, and he's getting lighter. He's feeling the light. He's defending himself. Something we have to do, and may have to do soon. Defend Christianity. So he's protecting Jesus here. And they reviled him. Now they're making fun of him. You are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. That was their classic answer always. We come from We know that God has spoken to Moses. But as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. When you know that biblical scripture said this has never been done, and you do not know where that man came from, and you're the reasoners and leaders of the spiritual, of this whole family there, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. But if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he can do nothing. So now we got another escalation. He's a man from God. That's a messianic statement. So what they answered him, you were born in utter sin, and you would teach us? And they cast him out. Now we get to the last act, and that's 35 to 38. Jesus leads the man to believe in him as Savior. Jesus heard, naturally. You notice he's in the background. He doesn't know how he's being defended in that office, but he's being defended by this young, what we would call today, young Christian. So he hears that he's got thrown out like garbage. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Now, some Bibles say Son of God, but in Hebrew, he knew exactly what Jesus was saying. Son of Man was a common term there, and it is in the New Testament. Born through man, fully human, fully God. That's John's gospel. He answered, and who is he, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. Here's the final escalator. He said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. Now, if that's not an example to us, to something that we should be doing in our blood family and our neighbors and so on, this was a perfectly crafted story of how God saves people. So I wrote, if I can find them, a few things. And I just want you to hang on a minute. Well, I'll read it from this one. Here's what some commentators are. The story is a hidden one, working beneath the surface of many challenges. We need to realize our own poverty, blindness, and we need apart from Christ. We need to see his eyes, the desperate condition of all who have not been illuminated. We need to consider before God whether we have rejected the evidence of our own experience. We need to consider before God whether we have God figured out. We need Jesus as our center of reference, like the blind man was, stable, secure, bold. No matter what situations come up, and a lot of them are going to come up, to us, just because of our relationship to Jesus, our Savior and Lord. So I want to say something, one more thing. Look at, almost like Dan, yeah. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Everybody sing that with me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. May God bless this message. Amen.